So it's a pleasure to welcome you, wrapped in attentive faces. And you are here, I hope, because you are motivated or self-motivated, like Graham. I'm not lecture bashing, but we're really promoting active learning, as you've probably picked up, because there's so much research that indicates it works. So that's what I really want to share with you today in this particular workshop, is how people learn, and you'll understand why active learning is essential. So the lecture has a long and venerable tradition. You're happy, the students are happy, but the research shows that if that's the only thing you do, all that beautiful knowledge is just going to wash right back out. So for our agenda, we're going to, basically, I'm going to share a little bit of theory with you. We're going to do a couple of activities, and we're going to move very rapidly through what's going to transpire this morning. So I want to give thanks to people that I borrowed material from with permission. And again, that's always important to do that. So all these slides are in your handout packet. And also there's a supplementary material for how people learn. I took a lot of the words off the slides and put them in these materials. So you'll see that when I'm thanking, this is the acknowledgement slide, I'm thanking Ed Newfer and Terry Doyle. So important to do. Okay, think, pair, share. You know the drill now, right? Turn to a partner. What do we mean by learning as a pair? Please come up with the definition of learning. Okay, just talk to a partner, someone next to you. Introduce yourself. What do we mean by learning? Okay, let me give you a formal definition. But first, the think, pair, share cartoon. One must think before one speaks. Okay, suppose I be the one who thinks, you be the one who speaks. Good, then we'll switch. It's not the way it works. Okay, here's a teacher's definition, and TD means it's from Terry Doyle. The ability to use information after significant periods of time. That's really important, because when I think back on everything I've forgotten, it's pretty sobering. And it's the ability to use information to solve problems, and again, putting them in a context. So learning is permanent. And unfortunately, a lot of students have developed the habit of cramming because it works for exams. It doesn't work long term. So try to encourage your students not to cram. Passing the test is not what learning is all about. It's not even close. So the one who does the work does the learning. And there are three biological definitions of learning. They're here in your supplementary material from three different sources. But basically, the biological basis of learning is all about strengthening synapses, appropriate synapses. So that means that when I'm up here lecturing, my synapses are firing away. When I prepared this, my synapses were firing away. But if yours aren't firing, you're not necessarily learning. So that's bottom line, why we need to get our students involved in active learning. Another thing that helps learning is repetition. That's why when I told you once yesterday to prepare your micro-teaching model, most of you probably didn't remember to do that, because I only told you once. So patterns aid memory as well. This is repetition, brain aerobics. You need to repeat, and ideally in learning, to help your students learn, repeat in ways that aren't rote memory. You know, give them pictures, give them diagrams, verbal, oral. That's why think, pair, shares work well, because they get those synapses activated and primed. So patterns can aid learning. And again, you've got some supplementary material on that. some examples of flow charts, concept maps, mind maps, and graphic organizers. That's on page 2. But I'm going to focus on just some active stuff. Which of the following slides are easier to remember? There's 1. There's 2. Okay? There's 1. There's 2. See the patterns? It's much easier to remember. Which is easier, counting backwards from 100 or reciting the alphabet backwards? The numbers. Most of us would have trouble. We'd have to go slowly doing the alphabet. But my Girl Scout days, we sang 100 bottles of beer on the wall. I don't know if that song is still being sung in Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, but boy, I got it down. I can do 100 backwards right away. The brain is a pattern-seeking device, so if we can help our students see patterns, that greatly helps their learning. They won't always be able to find those patterns. And so I use a lot of what are called graphic organizers, and this is an example of it. You give the students this for their homework. Instead of saying, we're going to talk about a debate on why we should use active learning or not, and you leave it there, give them this instead, something to fill out, something to focus on. So they give all the pros of using active learning, all the cons of using active learning, and all the caveats of using active learning. A caveat would be something that you need to keep in mind, such as the active learning, the activity has to be meaningful. The activity has to be relevant. So doing in itself is not enough. So anything like that, a graphic organizer that helps students see patterns, is a useful thing. Also, it's good to know when your information is learned as part of a whole, that it helps your students retrieve it, pull it out of their brain, remember it. If they can get part of that pattern, often the whole thing will come in. That's why, I don't know if any of you use, oh come on, Holmes, like the, to learn the Great Lakes. So you can remember Huron because you know the H. What are the, I'm sorry, I'm blanking out. What are those suckers called? Mnemonic devices. Yeah, thank you. Mnemonic devices. That helps because once you get part of that pattern, the rest of it just flips in. So again, help your students learn these things. They aren't often taught to them in high school. Here's one. If you wanted your students to learn all the players in a baseball team, would you have them learn them alphabetically? Or would you have them learn them by the location? Yeah, of course. The pattern's much easier to remember. Remembering them alphabetically would just be rote, not much point to it. Okay, so the implications for teaching and learning are structure teaching to emphasize patterns, explore opportunities to learn about the ways you can use concept maps, flow charts, graphic organizers in your teaching, and help the students understand the need for patterns. This is a shared ignorance. Okay, Williams will vote. How many here say the heart has 4 chambers? Obviously, they weren't learning deeply. You need to also motivate your students. And so there's a little article in your handout packet on motivation by one of our colleagues at University of Texas, Austin. And make it relevant. Again, that helps. The learning curve goes way up when students can relate something to themselves. That's why those of you teaching psychology or, you know, disciplines that are about self probably have an easier time of it than, let's say, the math teachers. So the motivational context means that we learn best what we want to know. That's why piquing your students' interest, sharing your own enthusiasm is really wonderful. And if you can give them choice and control, that can be motivating. So when I was teaching English literature at the U.S. Air Force Academy, I had a lot of very bright students, but they didn't want to read Hamlet. They didn't want to read Antigone. They wanted to fly airplanes. So when I taught the unit on poetry, I was very careful to give them a choice. I let them choose the poems. I didn't care which poems they chose out of the anthology. I just didn't want Hallmark cards and rap music, because I knew that any poem they chose was going to be fine. But that way they were motivated. They were sometimes motivated to choose the shortest poems, but hey, at least they were choosing. Ready for an activity now, and you'll notice there are some white posters all around. One thing that's useful, we're going to talk about later, is movement. Movement is very useful. So I'm going to ask you to get up. So if you could stow your material, please do. And what I would like you to do is move to any poster and draw a T. So pick any poster, spread out so there's not 30 people at one and 2 at another. So just spread out to any poster. 3 or 4 minutes, and I'll just watch. An affective domain, and this is the product of the brain that produces feelings, emotions. Affective qualities include attitudes, preferences, self-awareness, biases, ethics, self-esteem, enthusiasm, emotional. So David Hume talks about reason is and ought only to be the slave of passions and can never pretend to any other office than to serve and obey them. So what I would like you to do is on your poster circle all the things that helped or hindered you learn that you consider affective, okay, relating to emotions, feelings, not cognitive, okay? So just circle those. Talk about them. Thing the teacher said, and he meant it, he was glaring at them, was forget your family, forget your pets. It's all about this class. It's the rest of your life doesn't matter. And she said her learning shut down instantly, just instantly. So don't just think about, okay, I've got to cover this content. Remember, the context in which you're covering that content is really important. And that's why helping your students to get to know other people like you just did can be useful. And I was talking with one group, and encouraged them to circle hands-on, because a lot of you had similar things to that, you know, learning by doing. That's an affective thing. It might be a combination, but certainly I think the activity itself, the way you feel about doing something with your hands, is certainly affective, as opposed to memorizing or studying. So learning is really complex, and sorry about that. Emotions are really important in learning. So, again, warm, fuzzy picture here, but remember that students have to think you care about them. And hopefully you do. I mean, hopefully they're right. Want to move into a little bit of other research, but it has a lot of relevance for learning. You can download this whole book. If you just Google John Bransford, it's NSF funded, so it's out there on the web. And I thought it was interesting that several of you mentioned the internet as a way to help your learning. This is a great book, and as I said, it's free. I wouldn't print it because it's big, but you can take a look at it. There's a good chapter in there on the difference between novice learning and expert learning. I recommend you read that because we're all experts, but our students are not. And they learn differently than we now learn. Because once you're an expert, you learn a lot faster. You can skip a lot of steps, and our novice learners can't. So if we're skipping, as we would do, we're not helping their learning. So there's the URL. It's in your handout. And basically, that book is predicated on 3 key learning principles: prior knowledge, and we talked about this in my session yesterday. It's very important to find out what your students know and don't know. The deep foundational knowledge, nobody ever argues that content isn't important. Of course it's important. So that deep foundational knowledge is important, but notice the emphasis on concepts. So we're not talking on that second point about factoids, you know, a series of things that are crammed into their head, like memorizing the baseball field positions alphabetically. That turns them into factoids. You need the concepts. And metacognition, learning about learning. This was totally ignored when I was a student, both an undergrad and a graduate student. We didn't help our students learn to self-assess, to know if they were getting the material or not. But this is one of the 3 key principles for learning. So any way you can help your students self-assess before the test, before the midterm, before the final, we're doing them a huge favor to help their learning. So the first one, again, is find out what they know and don't know. And this includes their misconceptions. Here's the perfect cartoon: the tree of knowledge and the tree of commonly accepted misconceptions. So some things you can do. These are all listed in your supplementary materials. Focused listing. Take index cards because they're really quick and easy, and they can, you can collect them easily and you can sort them easily. So have students on index cards write everything they know about a given topic. So in physics, momentum might be a key concept. In literature, symbolism might be a key concept. So have them write momentum and jot down everything they know about it. You will be amazed at what they don't know and what their misconceptions are. But it only takes a minute, and then you can collect them and sort them. I sort them with, I have an on target, an okay, and a clueless stack. I don't tell the students my sorting method. But very fast, very easy, and you find out what they know and don't know. And they kind of get a wake-up call, too. You can have them write applications. This is very useful because if they can apply something, they probably understand it. And then this is one that I saw a friend of mine use I really like. Again, index cards. Students came into his law class, and he'd had them read a case study the night before. So that's what Comedy Cottage is about. That was their homework. And so you can see the first student came in. He had them write the point of the case study. The first student wrote, "No idea what this case is about, don't remember." Clueless. Then he conducted the lesson and had them draw a line before he dismissed them, and they did the same thing. What's the point of the case study? So this was just a quick, easy way to know what they came into class knowing and what they left class knowing. So I use this now in my lit classes. What's the theme of a lesson before dying? Discussion, what's the theme of a lesson before dying? So it's helping them self-assess as well as giving you feedback, and it doesn't take a lot of time. So learning principle number 2 is the deep foundational knowledge. I need a volunteer, and I need a volunteer for a memory test. And this person does not have to have a good memory. I would just like someone to volunteer who doesn't fear public humiliation. Thank you. Your name is?
Andy.
Andy? Okay. what we're going to do is I'm going to put up some words, and I want all of you to memorize them, and Andy will memorize them. But we're going to let Andy go first and give us as many as you can recall, and then we'll help him out. Okay? So 20 seconds for 15 words. Ready, set, go. Okay, Andy first.
Apple, banana, fish, bird, dog, cat, plum, couch, lamp, table. I can't remember anymore.
Okay, can we get the other 5?
Chair. Chair, dog.
Okay. It looked to me, Andy, like you were doing this. Did you clump them?
Yeah.
Okay. How many used this chunking method? Okay, that's good for patterns. How about other ways of remembering? What else did you use?
I use AABB or AABB CCCD.
Okay.
Yeah, the alphabet.
The alphabet as a pattern. Uh-huh.
I was trying to make up a story.
Good. A story. And you did too? How many did stories? Anyone do visualization where you just pictured a room? Okay? There's lots of ways to learn. And you did a great job, by the way, because the human memory can hold in short-term memory 7 plus or minus 2. You got it. And he got 10. But he used the patterns to help him remember. But at least you get overconfident, Andy. I actually had a community college student get 14, and she did it through chunking. But this is a good thing to discuss with your students, because you notice we had 4 different ways of memorizing this, of learning this. Students need to know there are other approaches. And the student, or the faculty member who did the worst on this, someone actually only got 2, believe it or not. What that person did, it was a he, was change strategies. You know, I tried to start off with the chunking and then move to memorization or something. Anyway, change strategies about 3 times in 20 seconds. That'll destroy your learning. So help your students understand that and talk about these things. So thank you, Andy. In fact, let's give you a round of applause here. Good job. Okay, some lessons learned. Too many to remember, so we need some kind of organizing framework. Chunking is one of them. And then learning principle number 3, metacognition. Again, try to integrate it into your teaching naturally. There's the cartoon biology test. Use aorta in a sentence. I ought to have studied more for this test. It's getting the students to think about their thinking. One thing you can do are punctuated lectures. When you're lecturing, just stop and ask your students a question. And I've listed those. There are several more of them in your supplementary material. You've probably heard of minute papers. Again, this is another index card activity. Just have your students, as their ticket out of your class, write down what was the most important thing you learned and what important question remains unanswered. Again, it's metacognition, but it's great feedback for you as well. And then I use minute papers for papers, and those are in your supplementary materials. You just, for when they turn in a paper or project, have them ask questions or answer questions about how they felt about the paper, what they thought was the strongest point, and so forth. So we're in the home stretch now. Whoops, went the wrong way. just some final things about how people learn, and you'll be amazed at how many of them you captured on your posters. For example, sleep was prominent. I'm going to mention sleep. The brain and learning. We learned as humans when we were moving. You know, if we had to save ourselves from that saber-toothed tiger, we were likely moving, and the point was move faster than the saber-toothed tiger. So the interesting thing is, educators totally ignore the fact that we're human. You've probably seen auditoriums like this, or this, or this. How many classrooms are like that? Where you're just crammed in there. Sorry, you're sitting, but that's why I had to get up and do the poster, so you had a little movement in the middle of this. So if you can get your students moving kinesthetically, that's a helpful thing for their learning. You've probably seen people who drum with their legs. They're kinesthetic learners for the most part. My husband does it, drives me nuts. But that's okay. It's helping him learn. Another thing is the brain is social. So again, that's why I was encouraging you to get acquainted with people throughout the whole TA orientation training, but specifically when you're doing your brainstorming posters. That's why I asked Andy his name, so we'd know who we were interacting with. So this is how the implications are. You want to collaborate whenever possible, but get people collaborating purposefully, okay, not just for the sake of collaborating. So this is how social animals work together, and that's what your students are. Students have to be paying attention. So at the very minimum, get their attention. That's why, you know, students who think they can Facebook and listen to a lecture, it's a myth. Multitasking is a myth. We can't do it. When we are texting and driving, for example, we're paying attention to the text. We look up, there's the truck, okay? We can't do two things at once. The brain is, I mean, this is just science. The brain cannot do two things at once. So obviously the implications for teaching are try to get rid of those distractions, set expectations. Again, we talked about the syllabus yesterday. That's one of the things you might want to put in your syllabus. And get your students into a learning, not a grading orientation. A bunch of you mentioned sleep. Good for you. Because again, when you're young, the myth is that you don't need sleep. You can get by just fine on 4 hours, thank you. Your brain will tell you otherwise. And again, that's another reason cramming doesn't work as well as learning over time, where it's going to stick. You want to appeal to multiple senses. Oops, sorry, I forgot about stress. I didn't see that in any of your posters, but I didn't get around to all of them. You had it on yours? Okay. Stress can really interfere. That's why if you're having any kind of personal, emotional problems, you heard the fellow Tom from the counseling center, get help. Get help. Try to diminish that stress in healthy ways. One poster also had hangover. That's not a healthy way to reduce your stress. Okay, and then multiple senses. Again, this is the idea of repetition. When you're showing students different ways of approaching a given concept, that can be very useful. So use your varied teaching strategies, multimedia. There's a session here on using multimedia, and you've hopefully seen it demonstrated. Vision trumps all other senses. It's the number one. So that's good to mention. And some of your posters mentioned exercise. In your supplementary handouts materials, I've got a quote from a guy named Rady that talks about the value of exercise. So to summarize, and again, I'd share these with your students as well, the brain needs exercise, sleep, oxygen. Don't forget hydration. Before I came to Texas, I lived in Nevada, very dry, and Colorado, very dry. So I learned the value of drinking water, and I actually weaned myself away from those sodas. I worked for a nutritionist, and finally he got it across. I threw him out of my office once when he was dissecting my lunch, but he did impress on me the importance of water. Okay. Questions before I start a cartoon finale for the end? Or comments?